I've been thinking a lot lately about why so many men become silent. Not cold, not really angry either. That's not the kind of silence I mean. I'm talking about quiet, more guarded, more careful, more restrained. At some point, I realized I made up a lot of rules about how I should talk. Conversations should be quiet, private, brief, controlled. It started to feel unsafe when others overheard too much. I don't think I noticed how much I had held back over the years. It wasn't that I lacked thoughts. It wasn't that I lacked feelings. It just felt safer that way. I made myself smaller. Answers got shorter. Thoughts got safer. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being honest with myself. I wasn't lying to people. I was still showing up for work, still taking care of responsibilities, doing everything I was supposed to do. But I stopped being honest about my feelings, what I needed, what wasn't working, what parts of myself were slowly disappearing. I think that's a very different kind of honesty. I grew up in the 80s and early 90s, divorced parents, the oldest of two boys. My brother and I are only about 15 months apart. And I remember feeling responsible pretty early. In many ways, I had become the man of the house, making sure my brother stayed out of trouble, making sure he ate if my mother was late, trying not to make her life harder. Looking back, I think that's when I started to learn that my job was to keep things stable, keep things together. Don't make things worse. Handle it. I didn't get it then, but now I see how that mindset changes the way you talk to people. You become careful. You learn control. You start thinking about your words before you say them. Eventually, without even noticing, you start editing yourself all the time. Not because you're trying to be dishonest, not because you're trying to hide. You just learn which conversations feel safe and which ones don't. I don't think most men become emotionally guarded overnight. It happens slowly, one discussion at a time, one relationship at a time, one bad experience at a time. There were definitely times in my life when speaking honestly led to conflict, especially in my marriage. At first, it was work, talking about difficult calls, stress, things I was carrying emotionally. Eventually, I started hearing things like, I don't know what I can do. It's too hard to hear about. And then, I hate your job. So I stopped talking about work. But I found out it usually doesn't end there. Eventually, other thoughts and feelings start feeling unsafe too. And after a while, you stop expressing yourself honestly before you even realize it's happening. You reduce yourself. Conversations get shorter. Explanations get briefer. Emotions become less visible. There's less openness, less vulnerability. Eventually, this just becomes your normal way of living. The fire service is interesting because firefighters can joke about almost anything. We bust each other's chops constantly. Dark humor is normal. Making fun of yourself becomes regular. But deeper conversations are rare. To be fair, things are better now than they were 30 years ago when I first started. But many people still struggle to talk about certain things honestly. Loss, depression, fear, stress, relationship problems, the calls that stay with you. A lot of those things get handled with humor or silence instead of real conversation. And I think the real danger is that silence changes you over time. I think I slowly lost parts of myself. And when I started talking to other men, I realized I wasn't the only one. Confidence, self-esteem, identity, creativity, connection. Not all at once, in small pieces, little by little. One day you wake up and you realize you haven't felt like yourself in years. The strange thing is, most of that happened before I realized it. Because I wasn't honest with myself. Not the kind of honesty we usually talk about. I wasn't deceiving anyone else. I was avoiding things I already knew were true. I kept telling myself everything was fine when it wasn't. I kept telling myself I could carry the things that were weighing me down more and more. Telling myself that if I kept my head down and pushed through, things would get better. But they didn't. Because you can't solve a problem you've convinced yourself is true. One of the strangest things after leaving my toxic relationship was slowly getting back to who I used to be. Strange because while my mind was saying, this isn't right, my soul knew differently. It wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about getting closer to who I am. More open, more creative, more emotionally honest, more at ease expressing myself, and it's still a work in progress. A lot of the guys I work with called it version 2.0, but one friend I've known since high school said it best. He said, "You aren't a new version of yourself. You're just the version you were before her." Honestly, a big part of that change came from being around someone who encouraged emotional openness instead of shutting me down. Part of why I've started thinking more seriously about all of this is that I've watched people around me quietly struggle. One day we're sitting at the firehouse kitchen table and we notice one of the guys wasn't himself. We changed the tone at the table and asked him if he was all right. After a few moments, we saw tears in his eyes, and he confided that his wife had been pregnant, but she had lost the baby only a few weeks ago. This conversation would never have happened 30 years ago, and probably not even 5 years ago. We tried to empathize with him and offered our help in whatever way we could. But we could see the weight come off his shoulders when he opened up to us. It made me realize how many people carry a heavy emotional burden while pretending they're fine. When I finally decided to leave my toxic marriage, I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't know what came next. I just knew I couldn't keep living that way. So I went to my station captain. I'd known him for years. We volunteered together. We were hired 2 weeks apart and eventually got assigned to the same company. I asked him if I could sleep at the station for a while because I didn't know where else to go. The first thing he asked me was if I was okay. Then he told me I absolutely could stay there. And then he said something I will never forget. It's about time. I remember asking him what he meant. He looked at me and said, "Guys have been trying to figure out for years how to tell you that you're miserable." Looking back, I think deep down I already knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Honestly, I think that was the first time I realized how much of myself I'd lost. Not because I was weak, not because I had failed, but because little by little over the years, I stopped listening to myself. I think the static in many people's lives is the outside noise telling them who they're supposed to be. Be strong. Don't complain. Suck it up. Be a man. After years of hearing that noise, it gets hard to hear yourself clearly. Maybe healing starts with being honest. Not with everyone else. Honest with yourself. Honest about what you're carrying. Honest about what you're avoiding. Honest about what you've lost. Honest about what you need. For me, nothing changed until I finally admitted what I already knew. People don't need more yelling. They need places where they can stop pretending they're fine. That's why this channel exists. Not because I have all the answers. Not because I'm an expert. But because some of us need a place to talk about the things we've been avoiding. And maybe in those conversations, we can start finding ourselves again.